Hey friends, we are here in Acts chapter 18, and there's three major things that happen in this chapter. The first one is Paul meets Priscilla and Aquila. The next is he's kind of tried before the council in Corinth. And the third thing is he meets Apollos. And Apollos is a very important figure in the book of Corinthians. But he actually meets Apollos in Ephesus. Anyways, so in the beginning, he meets Priscilla and Aquila. And they're significant because in the book of Romans, in the very beginning, he says, say hello to Priscilla and Aquila. And he was a tent maker by trade before this. And Priscilla and Aquila were basically kicked out of Rome because the Caesar at the time kicked out all the Jews from the city of Rome. So I don't know exactly what the Jews did to be kicked out of Rome, but that's what he did, and God used it. God used it to, minister to Paul, but also to spread Christianity because there was already Christians in Rome. So there was a lot of good that happened from that. I feel like Jews were dispersed all over the area, and it only helped to grow the church because Christianity would always come to the Jews first. Anyway, Paul goes to Corinth and he meets Priscilla and Aquila, and he has that trade already, and so he joins them, and they end up continuing on with him to Ephesus. So I'm led to believe that Priscilla and Aquila are just a wonderful couple, and they love God, and they just did a lot for not only Paul's ministry. We know that they accepted Christ. I'm gonna walk backwards so that's not so much wind in my face, but yeah, they accepted Christ, and they traveled with him, and they were, a great joy to Paul. I heard someone else say this, and I'll say it also, that a lot of times when you hear about great missionaries, in the Bible, a lot of times they were unmarried, but there's a lot of great ministries that you can do as a married couple that single people can't do. To bring someone into your home and, show them kindness in that way, that's something that people often need. I think I could be better at this, of just being more hospitable and with my family and bringing people over. So the next major thing that happens is when he's in Corinth, he does what he always does, and he goes to the synagogue first. And it should also be said, this is kind of funny, a little unfortunate, but there was a guy that was the head of the temple, or not the temple, a guy who's the head of the synagogue, and his name is Crispus. And he becomes a Christian. And so they kind of kick him out, and so they get this other guy named Sosthenes. So Paul, he goes and talks to the Jews, and they get really mad at him, and they kick him out, and he shakes he kind of shakes his clothes. They rent their clothes. That's like a sign of like I'm done with you. I shake off the dust of this place, and I'm going to continue on. And he's like, I'm going to the Gentiles. Your blood is on your own head. There's nothing else I can say for you. And so he went to the person who lived right next door, who was a Christian, and he stayed with him for a while. And so after they got upset with him, they decided that they were going to take him and try to have him killed, probably crucified. So they take him to the Roman governor, the same way they did to Jesus. And there, it was a guy named Gallio. And so they brought him to Gallio, and Gallio's like, look, I don't have a problem with this guy. You guys have a problem with this guy. he's not following your laws. He's not breaking Roman law. So he's like, I'm not even going to listen to you. And it's funny because, before that it said that Paul was probably really nervous. And I can understand, Paul's been pretty bold so far, but you can only be beaten and stoned and thrown out so many times before it really starts to wear on you. But God came to him and said, don't worry, keep speaking boldly. And so when this happens, they didn't even hear him speak. They just let Paul go. And then this is the funny part to me. Since Crispus left and Sosthenes came in, they had a new leader of their synagogue. And rather than taking Paul out and beating him up, they beat up Sosthenes, their own leader, probably the leader that brought Paul there. What's the most interesting thing about this is that when we read the book of 1 Corinthians, Paul says, say hello to my brother Sosthenes. Now maybe there's more than one Sosthenes, but I doubt it. It's a pretty ridiculous name. I'm led to believe that after the Jews beat up Sosthenes, he was like, forget this. I'm going with the Christians. They don't beat me up. So it doesn't make much sense to me why they beat him up. They must have been just so frustrated that Paul wasn't crucified or whatever, that they just had to take out their anger some way, and they must have blamed Sosthenes somehow. But I really think it comes down to spiritual warfare. I think that their anger is just so strong because there's so much spiritual things going on. I don't know if you have ever experienced that, where you're talking to someone about some subject and you feel like the anger that's coming from this issue is more than it should be. Like someone's getting angry about something that shouldn't, if you're ever talking about Christianity to someone, sometimes they can get more angry than you think they should. And I really do think there's some spiritual warfare going on there. Anyways, this is the end of Paul's second missionary journey. And from here, he heads home, but he goes through Ephesus first. And he doesn't stay too long, even though they want him to stay. And he says that, maybe I'll come back. But they meet Apollos. And Apollos is a guy who was very eloquent. And he was already preaching to the synagogues. But he was preaching not Jesus, but the repentance of John. And when he did that, Priscilla and Aquila kind of pulled him aside and said, do you know who this coming Messiah that you're preaching about? Do you know who he is? And he's like, no. And so they told him all about Jesus, and he accepted it right away. And the reason that this is important too is because when we read 1 Corinthians, it says that Apollos was like the head pastor there, and people were following him. They were following his teachings, and they were saying, "Oh, we like Apollos more than Timothy." And Paul was saying, "Don't follow Timothy, and don't follow Apollos, and don't follow me. Everybody needs to follow Jesus." And we'll get there again when we get to Corinthians. But that's something we should do also, and I should just mention it here. If there's somebody that's making Christianity look bad in your eyes, just remember you weren't supposed to follow that person. You're only supposed to follow Christ. So that is Acts chapter 18. All right, have a great day. Bye.